All right, let's dive into this explainer and explore the really fascinating origin story of how we actually came to understand the human mind. Go ahead and grab your mental files because we are going deep today. We're going to move from ancient, wild guesses to a literal relay race of rebellious ideas. Because, psychology didn't just pop out of thin air. It was built by this incredible series of revolutionary thinkers who basically looked at what the person before them said, got completely frustrated, and just changed the rules of the game entirely.
So think about it. Why do you remember your birthday but totally forget your homework? It's a great question, isn't it? For thousands of years, humans have wondered about things exactly like this. Why do we get angry? Why do we get scared? But for the longest time, people had absolutely no real answers. If you acted strange, they blamed ghosts or gods or evil spirits. They actually thought a literal demon was inside you. And their brilliant solution? Sometimes they would drill a hole right into your head, a practice called trepanation, just to let the demons out. Ouch, right? They clearly needed a much better approach.
Eventually, some really smart, ancient Greek thinkers came along and offered a fascinating contrast. You had Plato and Aristotle finally saying, wait a minute, maybe it's not ghosts, maybe it's all in our heads. Plato argued for nativism. That's the idea that knowledge is innate, growing inside us right from birth, kind of like a seed. But then Aristotle countered that with empiricism, arguing that we are born as a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and everything we ever know is written onto us by our experiences and our senses. Now, these were brilliant guesses, for sure, but that's all they were, guesses. They didn't have actual scientific experiments to prove any of it.
That brings us to Section 1, Birth of a Science, moving from guesses to the laboratory.
This massive shift to the laboratory is what triggered the very first great rebellion in psychology. Back in 1879 Germany, Wilhelm Wundt decided he was totally done with guessing. He wanted to measure thoughts exactly the way a chemist measures sugar. So he created structuralism, using introspection to break the mind down into tiny, static elements. Think of them like little Lego bricks of sensations and emotions. But then, an American named William James looked at that and rebelled. He entirely rejected those subjective Lego bricks. James argued for functionalism instead, saying our consciousness isn't a static, rigid building. It flows just like a river. Influenced by Charles Darwin, James believed our thoughts and habits actually have a function. They exist to help us adapt and survive in our environment.
Section 2. Secrets of the Unconscious. The Dark Detour of Psychoanalysis.
So, while those early scientists were looking closely at our conscious thoughts, Sigmund Freud took us on a totally different, much darker path. In 1900s Austria, Freud, who was a neurologist, mind you, not a lab scientist, was treating patients who had these mysterious physical paralyses with no underlying bodily cause. By just having them speak freely, he realized they had dark secrets buried deep inside. He famously proposed that the conscious mind, the stuff you're thinking right at this exact moment, is just the tiny tip of the iceberg sticking out of the water. The vast, massive part underwater, that's the unconscious, and it's holding all our repressed urges, childhood traumas, and hidden primitive drives.
Freud believed our entire personality is basically built on internal conflict. He imagined three distinct little structures constantly fighting it out in our heads. You have the id, which is the primal, pleasure-seeking devil on your shoulder going, I want candy now! Then you have the superego, the moral angel echoing all of society's strict rules. And stuck in the middle is the ego. The ego is the tired referee, just trying to navigate reality and keep both of those guys somewhat happy. Now, Freud totally revolutionized things by inventing talk therapy, giving people a way to unpack their childhoods. But because his ideas about these invisible internal battles were mostly untestable stories rather than hard data, a lot of lab scientists flat out rejected him.
Section 3. The Behaviorist Rebellion. The Radical Shift to Observable Science.
Enter John B. Watson in 1913. Watson was completely fed up with all the invisible thoughts, flowing rivers, and Freudian ghost stories. He essentially stomped his foot and demanded that if psychology was ever going to be a real science, it had to only study what can be seen and measured, behavior. Watson infamously claimed that if you gave him any baby, he could turn them into literally any type of person just by changing their environment. He really believed the inner mind just didn't matter, and he proved this with his famous, albeit incredibly mean, Little Albert experiment. He took a baby who absolutely loved fluffy white rats, and every single time the baby touched the rat, Watson made a loud, terrifying metal bang. Pretty soon that baby was classically conditioned to burst into tears just at the mere sight of the rat, or honestly even a fluffy bunny. Behavior, Watson proved, could absolutely be learned.
Then B.F. Skinner came along and took behaviorism to the absolute extreme.
He argued that what really controls us is what happens after we act. Using his famous Skinner box, he showed that animals, and humans for that matter, are entirely controlled by consequences. If you get a gold star, you repeat the behavior. If you get scolded, you stop. He believed free will was a total illusion. To Skinner, we were essentially just passive robots, entirely shaped by our environmental rewards and punishments.
Section 4. Humanism and Human Potential. The Warm, Fuzzy Rebellion.
But wait a minute, you aren't just a passive robot, right? And you definitely aren't just a bundle of sick, dark urges either. That realization is what sparked the humanistic movement of the 1950s. Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers looked at the gloomy behaviorists and the pessimistic psychoanalysts, and they rebelled. They focused on hope, dreams, and free will. Maslow mapped this out beautifully in his famous hierarchy of needs. He argued that humans are inherently good and driven to reach their absolute full potential, a state he called self-actualization. But check out the bottom of those steps. You absolutely cannot reach for the stars and become your best, most creative self if your tummy is empty or if you don't feel physically safe in your environment. You have to build it from the ground up.
Carl Rogers then added a truly beautiful concept to this humanist approach. He defined what we call unconditional positive regard. This is the idea that to really grow, humans need pure acceptance and love without any conditions or judgment, period. Now, while this radically changed therapy by giving deep dignity and empathy back to the client, you can probably guess the problem here. It's very mushy. Concepts like self-actualization and pure love are incredibly hard for lab scientists to actually rigorously measure.
Section 5. The Cognitive Revolution. The mind is back.
Science still needed to measure the unmeasurable. Following a massive MIT conference in 1956, scientists realized behaviorism was missing something huge: the secret middle step between a stimulus and a response, the brain actively thinking. To explain this, cognitive psychologists used early computer tech as an amazing analogy. Your eyes are the camera taking in data, your memory is the hard drive storing it all, and your mouth is the printer outputting the response. Today, this field uses incredible fMRI brain scanners, which is basically X-ray vision for thoughts, to study exactly how our attention filters work, how our memories are encoded, and how our built-in language machines actually operate.
Section 6. Today's Psychological Toolkit. The Biopsychosocial Model.
Today, no single historical school dominates everything. Instead, we use a giant melting pot of biology, psychology, and our social world to understand the mind. Let's take a simple fear of dogs, for example. If you have this fear, a structuralist wants to know the exact physical feeling of the panic. A functionalist wonders how fearing teeth actually helps you survive. A psychoanalyst dives deep into your childhood trauma. A behaviorist just wants to recondition you using candy and slow exposure. A humanist focuses heavily on making you feel safe and heard. And a cognitive psychologist works to rewrite the flawed thought processes in your mental software. You see, none of them are fully wrong. They all just provide a really unique and valuable tool for our modern psychological toolkit.
So, after traveling through this incredible history of rebellions, from once dusty lab all the way to modern brain scanners, I want to leave you with this. If you are scared of dogs, which of these historical helpers would you want to talk to first? Think about what really resonates with your own complex mind. It kind of makes you eager to dive into how we actually test these theories in a lab without cheating, doesn't it? But, well, we'll leave that for you to explore next.